Welcome one, welcome all to episode 244 of the Xbox Expansion Pass, recorded Saturday, September 21st, 2024. I'm your host, Lohr, the InsipidGhost, as always joined by my co-host, the intrepid Captain Logun. Alongside the captain today, we are joined by Jesse Norris of Xbox Era to chat about the Palworld Lost debatable reviews coming out this past week and the impressive slate of games on the way for Xbox. As always, we hope you enjoy the show. Logan, we like to start the show by offering words of kindness to those who have made our gaming weeks better. But first, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. It's been an interesting week in gaming. I was really kind of surprised by a lot of the reviews that came out for Plucky Squire, but also I've been sailing the seas a lot this week, and Call of Duty started its spooky season, so I've been enjoying some COD while we look at the new Battle Pass and Mike Myers and stuff. But outside of that, things have been really great. Thanks for asking. How was your week, buddy?
It was good. I'm fighting the weather. It's that 3-week into school year kind of thing. Yeah. Being, out coaching and whatnot. I had lost my voice this past week. So if I sound a little rough, I apologize. But I will say I'm quite happy and excited that Jesse is here with us. He's my words of kindness this week. I have long wanted to work with Xbox Era. I got to meet John this past summer at Summer Game Fest. And now, thankfully, my man Jesse Norris is here hanging out with us. Jesse, how are you, man?
I'm good. I'm normally a sleep-in type on Saturday. That's kind of what's made it a little hard. But things have slowed down. I've got the 1 week where I'm only doing like one main thing. Just working on a Shadows of Doubt review, waiting on Shattered Space and Vessel of Hatred and Batman Arkham Shadow, because I got the Quest 3 and it's fun to play on. And so why not? I asked very nicely and they sent it. They're actually, I can give you the email. They're very nice.
Yeah.
I mean, also like freaking, I don't have it down here. It's upstairs, but I have a Steam Deck, but I just asked Valve a year ago and then one day it randomly showed up. It's crazy what you can get when you ask kindly. Kind words help.
They absolutely do. I'm consistently baffled by the amount of generosity and kindness that people will send your way when people are good to one another. And then when I see people upset about not getting something and being like just absolutely rude and cruel, it's like, well, there you go. That's why.
Yeah, like you're setting yourself up to never be invited or get to that thing. There was a Flight Sim 2024, which looks amazing. A huge preview event out in Grand Canyon, but we go through UK PR because John started the company in the UK. So it's rare for us to ever get invited to anything in the US like that. But what point would there be in complaining about it? Like, we have a nice relationship with these companies, and I always try and tell people you shouldn't, just don't burn bridges. It's not worth it. There's no overall tangible benefit to your future if you just treat people poorly. Just never is. No matter how big you are, it's not going to actually help you in the long run. Like, valid criticism, all that type of stuff is great, but so many people conflate attacking someone else with valid criticism, where it's like you can actually help someone grow and do better if you give them proper critiques versus just laugh at, point, and, take a dump all over them online all the time. So
I think a lot of it depends on your approach as well too. Like there's a way to talk to people when it comes to criticism, or it comes to like speaking on something and saying like, for me, I see where you're going with this. It would be great if we could take a look at some of these points. You tell me how you feel about them. I'll share with how you feel about them. Let them know, like, I'm trying to help you with these kind of things, especially when it comes to like, how do I set up especially people aren't getting content or access to things. Sit them down and be like, okay, let's take a look at how you're approaching the situation. Like, who are you talking to and what are you saying and how can we kind of build that up? Luke is amazing when it comes to reaching out to PR firms. I've learned a lot from just in the last couple of years, like how he actually goes about like communicating with these different PR firms and stuff like that. And he always is very like thoughtful as far as like very demure, He tries to let them know, like, this is the content that we've made because of you. So thank you for giving us access to this.
Yeah, being able to... Companies don't want good coverage. They want good coverage. Like, they want you to have put time and effort into giving your real opinion. They don't want you to just, blow smoke. They don't want you to just rage bait. They just want to work with people who are going to be honest and open and do actual work to cover the thing that is sent. Like, I just got the new Turtle Beach headphones. They've been sending me that. They sent me this to cover Flight Sim. Like, they didn't send it to me for any other reason than they trust that we will use it. Then we'll talk honestly about it. And that's it. Like, I know people used to go like Paris over his Cyberpunk chair and some other stuff. And it's like, I have a $1,700 Hayworth chair that they sent me to cover. Like, as long as you are just open and honest about things and why you get them, how you get them, what they're for. I know some people really rail against I got sent out to San Francisco to do a preview for Dragon Age, and turns out I really liked it, so that must be why, because they paid for it. And it's like, it was actually a miserable trip. It was fly out 5 hours straight, late at night, land around 11, check into the hotel, immediately go to sleep, to get up immediately in the morning, to go spend all day working, having fun, playing a game and meeting people, but then immediately go walk back to the hotel, go to sleep, because I had a 6 a.m. Uber to leave the airport. Like, it wasn't some luxury vacation. It was work. Work trips are rarely fun. They're rarely long. They're not looking to spend an extra $100,000 on giving everyone a couple of nights to relax. They just want you there for the event. We try to be open and honest and let people know exactly what's going on in situations as much as we can. Talking about how PR relationships are important to maintain, but it's not important to maintain to make them happy by just saying nice things. It's important to maintain by being professional, because early access for us is key in getting anyone to watch anything. Like, I got my NBA 2K review out the day the game came out, and it did like $25,000. We got it out a week after the game came out last year, and it barely broke 200 views. Like, we're not, unless you're one of the biggest of the big, like, timing is everything. And so maintaining a healthy professional relationship and helping others learn where to go and how to ask nicely, or how to be professional has been a big part of it. We got a lot of help from people like Jeff Grubb and Jez Cord and others, just letting us know who to talk to, because that was always one of the hardest things. So now we've got all these good relationships with people, and it's not like, oh, they can just trust that we'll always give them a 9. It's, we can trust they're going to take what we give them and do an honest job of covering it. So,
I'm curious, because this is something that we run into sometimes, because we, in a very similar way, though not quite the same, we cover gaming news, kind of how it impacts Xbox. And just having Xbox in the name, the Xbox expansion pass, Xbox era, I think that predisposes expectations in a lot of ways. And I'm curious if you guys have to contend with, I guess, both sides of the coin that come with that, bringing in an audience, but also those that are expecting you to say certain things because you've got Xbox in the name, and then you don't because you give an honest review or an honest take on something. Is that frustrating for you? Do you see that?
We're used to it now. Like, there are those who say, wow, I can't believe Xbox said this. And it's like, well, no, we're not Xbox. We don't have any owner. We are just, John Sica Mechanico is the owner. There's no one else above him. It's just his thing. And then we've got our Patreon. But I think we have pushed for so long, outside of Nick maybe, of not doing the console worry, list worry stuff. Like, we have railed against list wars all the time. It shouldn't. One of the easiest forms of engagement throughout human history, especially when things started getting written and nostalgia began, was it's just comparative, like A versus B, or A, B, and C, or so on. And it's also one of the laziest. Like, anyone can just look at A, look at B, take a side, and just start attacking the other and always comparing them. It can be healthy at times where it's like, oh, wow, I really like that 30th anniversary PlayStation. I would love it if they made an OG Xbox version of the Series X. Like, that can be fine. But then there are people who will take that, make it an actual fight online. And because we have Xbox in the name, they will expect us to just be constant shills for the company. Like when John fell in love with Hellblade 2 early in the year, he gave it a 10. People were like, oh, of course they did that. Of course he gave it a 10. But also there's been other things where we didn't give it a great score, like people railing against me when I gave Scorn a bad review. And they're like, oh, you just hate Xbox because it's in Game Pass. I'm like, no. So many times people rail against you not agreeing with them. And they say, okay, you don't agree with me, so you are not being truthful. Or you agree with me, so you're being... It's nice to read a truthful review. And it's like, so many times, no one's actually comparing any of the words you write. They're just looking at that final score, and if it matches them, they're happy. And if it doesn't match what they want, they're upset. And that's the entire basis for the conversation, at which point it's just useless. There's no talking that out because they didn't read the 5,000 words on why I really like Starfield. They just saw the score at the end and said shill. They didn't read all the words that say we had about Gears Tactics where the guy didn't like it. Now in that case, he was mostly just complaining it wasn't XCOM, so I'd agree it wasn't the best review, but I hadn't started by then, so I don't take any responsibility.
Yeah. I do want to give a shout out to your Patreon. I put the link in chat.
Oh, thank you.
It's just an appreciation for you guys being here and just spotlighting. But I agree because I loved Hellblade 2. Loved Hellblade 2. That it's on my game of the year list. I just genuinely identified with it in a lot of ways, and it didn't click for everybody. And it was interesting hearing people, some coming for me because they were saying I'm a fanboy, others just great review, didn't agree. And I really appreciate when they give me critiques, but also just explain what they disagree about. And I appreciate when they've played the game to offer things that they disagree with about. That is always helpful. So.
That's been me lately with Star Wars Outlaws because I like it. It's a good game. It had a problem though where it only gave most reviewers 5 to 7 days, and it is a live in this world type of game that you should play for like a month to beat because you should just live in that world, take your time, go do everything. It's great. But there is a subsection on the internet, and they really started hitting Dragon Age the Veilguard yesterday for being woke and all that stuff, which is hilarious if you know BioWare's history. It's like BioWare's always been very progressive. But there is this subsection. I know. What? It's a shocker. Yeah. I might have dated Caden Alenko as a male shepherd at one point. I don't know. That might just be me. But there's a subset of conversation that starts up from very specific grifting people who will focus on how can I militarize my fan base to go push, and then other people will just join in, and if they share similar, mostly crappy thoughts, they caught myself way too late. Mostly crappy thoughts. That's my one.
No, you get a few of those.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they'll share mostly angry thoughts that are looking to push conversation because, like, most of the things about the preview that I got weren't about the preview. They weren't about the game. They were about this one specific topic of choice you can make in your role-playing game. And there's nothing about the actual game. There's no good conversation there. And at that point, it does just have to become this thing where you're just like, okay, you are not here in good faith. You go to the wayside. You who are here in good faith, you stay, we'll have a conversation, go through, do tons of talks. I'll reply on Twitter, reply on YouTube in the comments, like if it's an actual conversation. But you can tell right away they are only here in bad faith to try and anger you or just dump on the game and get people angry so they'll respond. So you just have to cut that out and not let it dominate. And that's been a big thing, I think, for our community is valid critiques always there. If you're arguing the point, way better than insulting the person. The moment you insult anyone, you're out. I don't care who it is. Like, I don't care if it's Jeff Keighley and you hate that. Go after the very obvious astroturfing. Don't go after the human being behind it so hard. I know if they're a big public figure, there's more play. Because they're a huge public figure, they're used to it. It's going to happen. But even then, just you can't encourage that type of discourse because it will start to dominate everything.
I tend to. Go ahead, Logan, please.
I was just going to say I find that a lot when it comes to people, like especially I think when I'm having conversations with folks about certain streamers and just content creators or like personalities, like you're saying, it's like, I don't know X person personally, so I don't know what they're like off the screen, but based on what they're doing and how they act, not necessarily a fan of what they're doing. So it's like try to recognize like there's a whole human being that's there, and you're only seeing like one facet, and that's not enough to really be able to provide like a full scope of who they are as a human being. Like they could be a character on screen or something, but behind the scenes they're like a loving father or a loving mother or going out and helping rescue animals or something. You know, there's no way to know unless you're actually friends with them who they are, and that can change a lot of perspective on people just based on that. But definitely, like I when you're talking about having like those bad faith like interactions with people online, it immediately threw me to like Hogwarts Legacy, and I was like so frustrated that there were so many people coming in bad faith to talk about a game based on other things outside of the actual game itself. But I was like, can we just have a conversation about how good this game is? Because it's the thing that's really, really impressing me, given that it's such a tie-in to like a big IP kind of thing.
Yeah, when you're going from, I don't like the person who created this IP, and thus anyone who does any talking about this game is evil. Like that just doesn't help. People are immediately going to disconnect from it. No matter how much you feel it, no matter how much you want to talk about it that way, the moment you are so yay or nay, A or B, it's completely binary choice. There's nothing about this that can change my opinion, and you are just pure evil if you play this video game at all. And it's like, I get where you're coming from. I don't even disagree with it. I just know that online you are immediately going to just turn off a ton of people who otherwise could listen to you if it was a more nuanced, less attacking conversation. The moment you start attacking someone that you don't know just as this big generalized group, and overgeneralization is one of the worst parts of online discourse. It's no different in gaming. Like people just look at everything as a monolith. They look at every company as a monolith. They look at every single part of online discourse is you are either this or you are either this. And maybe there's 3 or 4 in this thing. But the reality is you have your extreme edges, and then you've got most of the people mixed in between, and you don't know at all where they actually are. So you can't just make these giant assumptions all the time. And you can't have these crazy parasocial relationships, which is what social media has really entrenched in all of this. Like I have people who assume they know me, they know how I feel about every issue, they know how I'll feel about every game, just because they've watched me a bunch online. And you might have an idea, you might have more of a clue than I would for you when I don't know who you are. But that's why I try not to just make these big, broad, sweeping statements and assumptions. There are points to make, there are ways to make them. And the moment you know someone isn't looking to have a discussion, they're looking to have an argument, I'm just out. I have no interest in it.
I tend to agree as well. I find them tiring, exhausting. I don't have the energy to invest into that particular type of debate. I love talking about games, talking about business decisions. You know, is it smart to put out a PS5 Pro? Is it smart the way Xbox is messaging? It's no console for the future, or maybe we should make the most powerful hardware. I like those discussions, but the moment it becomes, well, they suck because this, they suck because of that, or this one's better because this brand, I'm done. That's not my jam. That's
I have
very
that with Nick all the time, where he's like, "Oh, they're idiots. I would know how to do this better." And it's like, maybe they're idiots. Maybe you're an idiot. Maybe you would know how to do it better. Maybe you don't. But to just always broadly assume that you know better than the people that are in there that get everything, even if it's because one person in the organization is telling you stuff. Like, there's so many thousands of executives at Microsoft. There's over 200,000 employees. Like, these companies are so mind-blowingly big, and they go through so many different things that we never hear about or only find out in leaks. Like, we don't know, so we try to make educated guesses. I get driven crazy when people just make broad assumptions and call you a shill if you're like, well, I don't know, maybe. I can't agree with you because I don't know. And they're like, oh, you're just shilling for them. Like, no, I don't. They don't need me to shill for them, and I don't like the corporation. Why would I like Microsoft? I can like the people there. I can care about the developers there. But like, these companies don't need your defense. So it's frustrating. People don't want to actually talk. They just want to talk at you and then have you nod and then go to the next point.
Yeah, I often
Nick.
Logan and I often joke that we would have way more listeners if we spent our time explicitly bashing PlayStation and telling
You'd
everybody
be
how great
surprised.
Xbox was.
There's a
Speaking of-
really hard ceiling on that. Like there is actually a very hard ceiling on how much you can grow for most people if you focus on the negative.
I believe that.
I do believe that as well. And it's not like we've cultivated a wonderful Discord community, great people. I'll call out Coffee Chick, who was kind enough to enter in right away and just gift subs right off the bat. That kind of stuff helps shows go round and it's appreciated. But also, in our Discord every day, it's good mornings, it's kindness, it's hey, I just platinumed Astrobot. I'm loving Astrobot. Did you like the new 30th anniversary PlayStation? Which I do want to talk about at some point because it does look awesome. I think it looks beautiful. That's how they should have shown the PS5 Pro. I think it's just gorgeous, but
Well, they don't have that many of them, so it's probably why they didn't.
You're probably right, for sure, and it's a bummer. But I love supporting games in the community and seeing people do the same. It's so much.
You get a more passionate audience if it's coming from a legitimate place. If it's just coming from the I bounce from angry podcast crowd. They just jump in there, they chat, they might do some super chats, but your actual community is just going to be a bunch of angry people who like end up yelling at each other. Like they'll Ouroboros the friggin' channel. It's
right.
It's not trying to push positivity on people. It's trying to engender this discourse where it focuses on the positive without ignoring the negative, where it's an actual discussion about the negative, where it's actual criticism and I wonder what they could do and maybe this would be better type of stuff, and not, wow, they're all dumb jerk a-holes and I hate them, and yelling at each other, and then you eventually everyone just starts yelling and yelling and yelling. You're just trying to avoid that side of it. You don't want to become the forum that exists because they were too salty for two of the worst forums out there. Like you want to be this place where everyone feels they can just come, they can talk, and they're not going to get attacked. So
Agreed.
unless they're a shitty person, and then they do get attacked. We've had
Joseph
Moran
Moran of the Trophy Room.
Yep. He hates Plucky Squire.
That's right. Bad
But
person.
He's the same as myself, Nick, and John, who all think gorgeous. Boy, I wish I could play it more instead of having to watch stuff.
Let's go ahead and transition to that, because that's one of our topics today is the Plucky Squire, the reviews for it, because Logan did the XEP review, was very high on it. We don't necessarily do numbered reviews, but one of the things he included in his review, which I'll encourage people to go check out, was that if we did, it would be in the 9 to 10 range out of 10 because he just enjoyed it so much. But our good friend Joseph Moran didn't enjoy it. We know what you guys weren't on that platform as well. So Logan, would you talk to me a bit about Plucky Squire? I did include in our notes a review roundup, and then let's
we did a review.
about it.
It's not everything.
We've got you in there as well.
Yeah.
See, I actually really loved it. I thought that the game did a perfect job of what it was intending to do, which was a nostalgic trip through like the old style of games. And I've seen the argument as far as a lot of folks talking about, like, it prevents you from actually kind of playing the game itself, how the narrator kind of kicks over and takes that action. But for me, that was part of the charm. We are like, you're actually like playing through the game, and you're actually like going page by page. If it was just an open world and you could have like the little goblins and spiders and stuff hopping around, then yeah, I could see like, okay, just let me play through the game. But there's intent with each page turn to kind of tell more of the story. And I was just allowing the narrator, it's like being able to interact with an audiobook and talk to, the characters as you would get to talk to them as you're like going through the actual story. And then with the next beat, the narrator picks up the rest of the audiobook. But it's like having a phone call with someone who's trying to do an audiobook or something like that. And it just, I don't know. I think I agree with everyone when it comes to they nailed the style, they nailed the design. The combat feels like it is pretty straightforward. Like there's only so many things that you can do, but they've also tried to build in the fact that this is a 2D and 3D game. And when you play around with puzzle systems that include that kind of, transitioning between 2D and 3D with the book, yeah, you're not going to have too many like sword attacks. And that's not necessarily the goal of the game in this case. It's more just like working through the puzzles, working through the story, which I think a lot of people were expecting a lot more combat, especially in the 3D realm. But that was kind of my response to seeing folks kind of not quite as enamored as I was.
Yeah, I think John was coming from the point of view of he just wasn't that interested. He did not find himself that interested in the story because he is A-okay with more story-focused games, as evidenced by his love of like Hellblade. And he normally loves that style. The mixture of not really digging the story as much and it constantly showing you what you had to do quickly on most things it pulled him out of it for the most part. I do think they said they're going to add the ability to not have it do that, where it like kind of just gives you where you got to go or whatever at the start of an area in the future, which I think would help a little. It's good to have it as an accessibility thing for people that need it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's just one of those things where I do think over time, you've seen more like it was like almost 90 on OpenCritic at first, and it's gone down as more came in. I think it's like 86 or 85 now, something like that. It might be 84.
Yeah,
really good game.
For Open 83.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, it's gone down even more than I thought. Like really good, but just one of those things where you have to be in the mood to watch as much as you do sometimes. And for some people, they are just way more gameplay focused. Like I know that's Nick's main thing. He hates cutscenes, especially when you can't skip them. Freaking guy skipped every cutscene in Alan Wake 2 and gave it a 10. I'm like, How do you have no idea what's going on? Because he doesn't care. Because look. It's like I've said. You can ignore his opinions most of the time. They're not bad. They're not good. They're just insane. They don't make any sense to a normal human being. But yeah, like one game that's similar that I really liked, smaller budget, didn't push the 3D as much, was RPG Time: The Legend of Right. It was an Xbox exclusive for a long time before finally going to the Switch. It was just two guys who started making a game in Japan in high school and then put it out 16 years later. They were working on it the whole time. Just a couple of guys learning how to make a game for most of their teenage years to their adult life. I can't recommend it enough. I gave it a review. I gave it a really high score. I think it was like 8.5. Super charming. RPG Time: The Legend of Right. WRIGHT.
Thank you.
And you're pretty much you're a kid hanging out with another kid after school. And the kid you're hanging out with has just drawn a ton of stuff and has it all set up in the classroom. And you're hanging out and he's like playing you through his tabletop game. But obviously it's a video game, so it's all animated. And you're just going through tons of different mini games and stuff. It's super charming. And that was always the one I looked at. And like the Plucky Squire was like an evolution of that type because it is from the page into the real world and you're doing all this stuff. That one, having played them both now, I think that one did nail the mix of story and platforming and different mini games a little better. It isn't nearly as pretty or music's not as good, all that type of stuff. It was obviously a much lower budget thing. But if you did like the Plucky Squire, I would highly recommend that one. It's a Play Anywhere game too. So if you don't even have an Xbox, it is on the Microsoft Store. It is on Switch. I don't know that it ever came to PlayStation. But yeah, I would say don't love the Plucky Squire. But I understand the people who do, who were more in the mood for that type of experience than I was.
I think that
you
was
guys
that
got
was
a question
kind of
from Todd. I'm sorry, Logan. I keep cutting.
No,
you
you're
off.
good.
Me too. I was you got a question from Todd. Do people find story an issue with more quirky and cheerful games? Logan, would you start on that one since I cut you off?
I don't know that I'm not sure that I really understand like the scope of the question on this. I mean, are we looking at like Hellblade as a comparison point to say like the story is better because it's more dramatic or more dire in this sense?
Most story games most story games are visual novels with incredibly quirky, weird stories. So I think if you are into story-focused games, they end up being visual novels, which are way bigger in especially places like Japan than we normally think of. And they do tend to focus more on the weird and the quirky and than the realistic and dire and type of stuff. So I don't think so in general, but it's a very generalized question. So it can vary by every person. So in the end, it's just how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I would say like most indie games, and I joke with my friend Kylea, who we were doing Destination Indie for a long time. We would play through a lot of indie games that came through on Xbox Game Pass, and there was always a joke about, like, okay, well, is this game going to be someone dies or you're eternally sad? Like that was the two story beats that most indie games on like Game Pass were having and stuff. So that's why when I look at something like Plucky Squire, and I'm like, so many people are asking for things like a Banjo or a Super New Lucky's Tale or something like, a cheerful game for kids to come out and play, and how Microsoft doesn't have enough like mascot platformers. And I'm looking at Plucky Squire like, here you go. Here's what people are asking for, but it's not Banjo, but it is very Zelda. So, if this isn't good enough, like how do you expect a Banjo to hold up, or a Conquer?
Yeah, and it is on PS Plus, so hopefully they got a decent deal there. I know Devolver's talked before about how they are trying to make sure they keep getting paid well enough for putting their things into subscription services. It is, I think, $30 or $35 on its own. It's on pretty much everything. I do think the age of the third-party exclusive is dying a bit, because a lot have noticed, well, this helps the platform holder way more than it helps us. Like, you've seen it with Sega. Koei Tecmo's starting to bring more stuff like friggin' Atelier series, which has never been on there. Vanillaware, Atlas. I think so many of them are starting to realize, oh, we should just be everywhere, and it should help. And so in the genres that haven't had the most games, I definitely hope it is something that means there is more variety. Because even as there is now, I think for the average person, there's way too much. There's too much to keep up with. It's one of the reasons why a bigger game like Concord can come out and fail miserably. It's because it's first off, it took way too long. You can't AAA hot genre that might not last forever, and then everyone's entrenched in their thing. So we will have to look at the indie side, I think, to fill in a lot of those things that people want AAA to do. And there are just a ton of smaller, really fun games that can fit that more lighthearted side, like Creatures of Ava, super lighthearted, no action, no I'm going to hurt you combat. The only combat is things are trying to hurt you, and you are healing them to stop that from happening. Like that is the whole thing, and it's gorgeous. Unreal Engine 5 looks like Fortnite type graphics. And that one, like those types of games from the smaller devs and the smaller things, I think are gonna and ultimately ends up carrying more, because from Microsoft's point of view, they've got, as weird as it is, Call of Duty, which is a game most kids play. Once the moment they hit their teens, that's all they're playing. And they've got Minecraft, which is what they played before when they were younger. And they've got Roblox on the platform for a long time, where people are entrenched. So, like with Astrobot, it feels like a lot of kids' games are, I was a kid when I played games like this, and I would like something new as a 30 or 40-year-old to experience for a change. More than kids games, because they're in Roblox and Genshin and Minecraft and what they see Streamers playing, and that's what they focus on a lot. Like that's been my kids. They love Dead by Daylight. Why? Because they watched some streamers play it and have fun, and so then they would be little streamers in group chats with their friends while they were playing. It's a very different overall industry than a lot of people covering it seem to think. It's like why I don't think like Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart didn't do crazy numbers, even though it's an incredibly well-made game, because it's not for its target audience in the end. That's just one of those tougher things where kids are very different behaving than I think a lot of us assume out of them. They want to play what the people they're watching play, and that is not most single player stuff. They're playing co-op things, they're playing PvP things, they're playing things that they can play together and have fun and bring others with. And so big co-op stuff like Palworld, yeah, you might eventually end up shooting everything to death or chopping people apart after you capture them with a ball. But like those are, I think, the more kids games, at least for now.
Mm-hmm. You touched on a number of different things there, and I want to go back, if you would, to the idea of third-party exclusives and how that market is changing, because you mentioned Sega and Koei Tecmo, and then we're just now getting news of Square Enix. Not just now getting news, but we are aware that Square Enix
repeated news of Square Enix. Yeah,
there you go. That's how you put it. You shifting its strategy as well, because being an exclusive third-party game just doesn't make sense anymore. It benefits Sony. It doesn't necessarily benefit, Square Enix themselves. And I look at something like Capcom. They just put out the Dead Rising remaster, which it's the multiple remasters, but it's reviewing well. And you look at they've been putting things everywhere in Game Pass, on PlayStation. The only recent exclusive I'm aware of for them was Kunitsugami, which I really liked, by the way. In
it was
Game
everywhere.
Pass. Was it everywhere?
Mm-hmm.
Was it?
Yep.
In my mind, maybe it's just because of Game Pass. But I love that game, and I think that's the strategy going forward, because Sega does the same. So good to hear, and I want more of that.
Yeah, it's a thing where there are tiers of games that make sense. Like, we're a very small team. We can only get Rogue Legacy 2 out on Xbox and PC to start, and we'll get it to everything else eventually. And they did, and it works. And even Baldur's Gate 3, that game was on fire when it came out on PC. It was on fire when it came out on PlayStation, and it was on fire when it came out on Xbox. But it's so good that people ignored that. So they got 3 big launches out of it. Like, and it's one of the things I think that's going to be tougher with Sony and getting their stuff day and date on PC is who's making it. You've got Nixes who can do really good ports, but even though God of War Ragnarok one's now having problems, like they've only had a couple of rock solid PC ports, and that was one thing that took a while for Xbox to spin up, and that is the exact same it ends up being for a lot of third parties. So there will still be things that are de facto exclusives, especially if it's like a Creatures of Ava and they get a big publishing deal to be on Game Pass. Not published by the company, but they get a Game Pass deal or they get a PlayStation Plus deal. If you're not set up to get on everything right away, yeah, there's still going to be exclusives, but for most other things, especially bigger budgets, AA's to the AAA, it does not make sense to take a bag of money at the start from one platform explicitly for the only reason of you're not going to be there. You're only going to be here, not there. Because no matter what they pay you, it's proven time and time again. Like Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, incredibly well reviewed, but they're tied to a decades-old deal now that I cannot imagine is going to cover what it would have gotten them being on PC and Xbox day and date. Because I know like people say, oh, they need to at least be on PC. Yeah, PC would be bigger than Xbox, but if you're doing an Xbox game, the way the development kit is now, you essentially get a PC game. Like that's the way they've tried to incentivize more ports, and it works a ton, especially with like Sega and Atlas. All their stuff's always play anywhere because they're just like, okay, free PC port. There are reasons and incentives to stay on every platform, and they're only getting stronger. They're not going away. We're seeing more and more support for the Xbox platform because companies have come back to realize if we're going to grow, we got to go back there. We've got to go to PC day and date. Like we can't ignore everything for the big one because only Nintendo's Nintendo and only Nintendo's games sell like Nintendo's games on Switch. So even though Switch is enormous and you can do really well on it, it's still not enough to make up for everything else. And it's not like the Series S is holding anything back. When you're still making Switch ports, when you've got to support PC, when being Steam Deck verified is so important, like there are all these different targets. You might get some people complaining about one target. It doesn't mean it's harder than the other targets. It's just complaining about that target when I want it to be on the really powerful stuff. And even the Series X and PS5 are not really powerful. They were mid-tier at best at launch, and now they've fallen 4 years behind. The PS5 Pro might catch them up a little bit, but then you've still got that same CPU with a little bit higher speeds. Not going to help a ton. So more third parties realizing they need to be more places but you need to be. There's always a balance. Like we've got a deal to be in this subscription service. We're going to focus on being there for a bit. I don't think Xbox is huge on saying you can't be the other place, unless there's tiers. Like they've had games there was one Sea of Stars was in both of them at launch. Like that would not have been the case a couple years ago because it was always, okay, you'll be in our thing. You can't be in anyone else's for this period of time, or you can't be on their platform for this period of time. And I think we've seen less of that. And the only time you see these exclusives is when they simply can't handle all the work at once, because it is very hard. The more platforms you're on, the more work you got to do. It's nothing's easy. Everything wants to break when you're making video games. That's what every developer we've ever talked to constantly tells me. So, but the bigger you are, more you can do.
When I started XEP, I felt like I was saying Xbox. And in the last 3 years, it's Xbox PC nonstop. I say PC right next to it. And I expected to say Xbox PC Cloud more often than I do. And so when you talk about putting things in other places, I wonder if Xbox didn't fail at pushing the availability of the cloud to other markets. Perhaps not the US, where we're so spread out and internet's not quite as reliable, but when you look at like Asian markets and some European areas where cloud could be more viable, I would have expected to say cloud more often as a viable option.
I do have a thought on that one. CMA hurt by not letting Activision Blizzard games in. That definitely, like if Diablo 4 and Call of Duty were going in the cloud, you'd hear about it a lot more. Instead, they're going in GeForce Now, which is still PC, so people who aren't that into PC are going to lose their minds. I think the big thing with the cloud is it's really hard for them to make any money on it, because they have to pull away from selling consoles to keep adding more server blades, and they have to pay for all those server blades to run all the time, which is very expensive. So they don't push it as much, but then they have been saying in financial statements that it is their fastest growing area. So I do think it is growing. I just think it's one of those things they don't want to grow too fast. First off, because regulators really started losing their mind about dominating the cloud. And Microsoft has learned to silently dominate areas. Don't crow about it. Don't push your weight around. Just keep using your unbelievable wealth to constantly grow in an area. But say nice things in public. Play the game. Donate to all the awful politicians that'll, not go after you. They're playing the game of not being the bad guy, which I know people like Nick always say, just be the bad guy. It's like, no, they can't. They will get targeted immediately, especially with the FTC in America, the CMA wanting to push things, and the EU really wanting to push things. People are always shocked. How come the EU isn't going after Microsoft the way they go after Google and want to break them up, and the way the FTC wants to break Google up? It's because Microsoft is a terrible company who's being smart about how they're not great, like as a corporation. And not being too dominant, because they're the only ones that have what I think is the only business model that will grow in cloud, which is you pay us $20, you have a controller, and then pretty much any screen you have in some way, it's probably going to be able to play this bevy of games that are on the service. Because people don't... PC people are PC people. They'll go with NVIDIA, but that also means you're either paying for NVIDIA and Game Pass to get some of the Game Pass games on it, or you're buying everything. And the way you can grow quick is a subscription that really focuses on having everything there ready for you to just work. Like that console just works experience. The biggest issue with the cloud, and I see people always say they should do a cloud-only tier. I don't think the cloud-only tier would be less than like $15 because they don't make any money on it at 20. So they don't. It's incredibly expensive to run all that hardware all the time. Like it's not cheap, and the way it all works, they're also not always allowed to just write off every cost. Like they might not have to pay themselves, but they have to put in their budget what using their own services costs them. Using Azure as Xbox, they have to pay for it in their budgets. Like everything's like, that's why Twitch doesn't make any money, because their budgets all include them using Amazon Web Services for all their video streaming, and it's unbelievably expensive, and it eats all the money they make. So finding that balance and I think the balance is going to end up being, we have PC Game Pass at 15 and we have Game Pass Ultimate at 20. And that's going to be all they have. Because if the next generation is it's an Xbox that can play PC games, you can't charge for multiplayer anymore, because everyone will just play the PC version of every game where they don't have to pay. So I do think the future for Xbox Cloud it's just the thing that's always in Game Pass, unless you're on PC.
Logan, we talked last week about how there's a new tier of Game Pass. New may not be the right word per se, but
it is technically new. It's never existed before.
Yeah, and we sort of knew about it, but then people were caught off guard with it. So we couple that news with people like Todd asking for like the $5 only cloud tier, which Jesse understandably is saying wouldn't work per se, but then
I'd love it for our customers. I just can't see them doing it.
Right. No, I'm with you on that as well, Jesse. So Logan, let me ask you this. Do you think Todd is right that a $5 tier would be enticing to the audiences? Do you agree with Jesse that it couldn't work? And then Todd kind of following up saying $20 for cloud is just too much. What do you think the right sweet spot would be in there?
I think $5 is a brilliant idea. I think that's a great way to tack on one more streaming service on your Samsung TV with a controller and say like, hey, cheaper than Disney Plus and cheaper than, a quarter of or a third of the price of Netflix. And you get way better games if you want games for just cloud streaming. I think that's a way better deal for the casual audience. It's a cheap buy-in. It's almost like a no-brainer at that point, and you're getting a lot of really good content through that. And what does it cost Xbox? The servers are already there. If anything, what you're doing is creating customers by having them generate accounts for Microsoft for Xbox. And then that's the gateway drug into consoles. That's the gateway drug into Game Pass with PC access and stuff. If they've got a TV, chances are they've probably got a tablet or a computer. So chances are there's going to be other games that they want to play. But yeah, $5 for cloud streaming, throw it on TV or a Roku or something like that. That seems like a really good marketing push. Why I don't know why we're okay with a $10 PC only Game Pass tier, but a $5 cloud only isn't. That seems like a really good deal to me.
Also a good deal, that $5 super chat from Corkenstein. Thank you so much. We appreciate you, my friend. He says, great convo, gents. Great to see you, dude. Thank you for your generosity. We appreciate you.
The $12, I think it's $12 now on PC. It finally went up because
you're right.
So you've got your growth mode pricing on PC. That's why it's not like 15. And you've got you guys are locked in pricing for Ultimate at 30. If they were ever going to do a cheaper variant for cloud, if it was a loss leader to try and get people in and hooked before the prices go up, I could see maybe like a $10 tier or something, especially if it is just at that point cloud, PC, and Ultimate. I also wouldn't be shocked if at some point it's almost like if they feel they're not going to grow a ton more on PC, it all becomes Ultimate. They've been showing time and time again they're not looking to lose money on stuff. Like them and Sony, they're both the way the industry is right now. Until business picks up somehow in some way, if it ever does, I do think they are more in the avoidance of loss than using it to try to grow.
I see. I have advertising on Instagram and stuff that tells me about how Disney Plus and Hulu and Max can all be bundled for like $16 a month. And I keep looking at that and I keep thinking, that's a really good deal, except I've already got a package through Hulu and Spotify for like $10 for both. So for me, like it doesn't really necessarily entice me enough because I don't have enough time to watch all that content. But in a world where we have something like this already existing, it is not outside the scope of possible that Netflix and Xbox could make a partnership where cloud service streaming is only through or is available as like a bundle with Netflix for like $20 a month. and you get Netflix and you get Xbox cloud streaming, and Xbox has a way to pipe in their content into Netflix, and they're already in the gaming market. So it would build partnerships for Netflix to be able to talk to publishers, get stronger access. It would build a good partnership with Xbox to be able to utilize all of the subscribers that are already connected up to Netflix. And like, if you want to push cloud, look at who's already winning in that area and start making deals with them to start bringing their customers over to you, and vice versa.
We've seen that with the integration with GeForce Now, I think, because that's the only other really viable one. I do think the regulators weren't wrong. I do think Xbox cloud streaming is like the de facto one for people in the casuals in gaming, who are the much bigger audience than the hardcore. Also, a lot of those super cheap bundles are always the ad versions, which are terrible. As somebody who gets the ad version of Disney Plus through the cable we have to have at this house, it is miserable. Every 5 to 10 minutes, they just give you 2 minutes of ads. It just cut scenes right off. Drives me crazy. There is a constant, never-ending cost to running cloud servers, though. That has been one of the reasons why I think they very much would not ever go full cloud. I don't think any of these companies would, because then you are paying for all of them to run versus all of your customers paying for all of them to run. And maybe you don't make a ton of money off of that hardware, but you're not paying for that hardware forever. And you're not paying to replace all that hardware forever. You're doing R&D costs for new hardware, the next generation, but then you're charging $600-700 for the new boxes anyways, because you're not going to lose that money anymore, or you're not going to lose as much, because we know they lost like $1.5 billion on Series X because they were selling it way cheaper than it cost them to make and ship and all that type of stuff. The constant cost of running cloud, they could make it as cheap as they want. They just have to be ready and have it in their budget to lose all that money, hoping that it will grow at the cheaper cost. And I don't see any of these companies interested in losing money. Nintendo hasn't been the entire generation. Sony has made it very clear they are not interested in that anymore. And we had Grubb on last week, and he was like, if either of those companies knew how things were going to go and how they were going to sell, they would have made each of those things $600 last time. They would not have made them cheaper. Everything would have been more expensive because they probably would have sold about the exact same amount. So...
I kind of want to poke at something, if you don't mind. The comment about the like streaming server or like cloud servers being an ever cost sync or like cost loss, as far as like them just constantly having to do that versus hardware. It feels to me, depending on how they build their server blades and how they build their server structure, that at some point, if consoles, or if gamers stop buying games, like, so we'll just say like there's a reason why, gaming stops or slows down, those server blades in my mind should be able to be reallocated to some other purpose. Whereas if you have a bunch of hardware like consoles sitting in a warehouse waiting to be sold, those are just lost. That's just lost investment that you can't do because nobody's going to buy the consoles. So there's no reason to even have that hardware. Whereas at least with cloud servers, yeah, they'll cost over time, just having to have them operated, but they could also be reused for other assets or other purposes beyond just a box full or a warehouse full of boxed up product that isn't moving. Am I wrong in that, or is there something I'm missing?
No, it's more just the cost. Like it was as someone who was going through and doing a running dialogue on the FTC case a while back. One of the main things they were talking about, especially they were in "we're terrible, we're awful, everything's too expensive" mode to try and seem weak at the trial. But they did say, and they did have documentation backing it up, that they had never really made money on the cloud, that it was seen internally as a potentially not viable service because it required something taking off crazy like GTA 5 for them to ever have their first profitable month. So just from Sarah Bond's own words, they have talked before about how unbelievably expensive it is to run all of those servers and to fill the racks, and the scale of people they would need to actually start making money is extremely high. They tried to make it sound like they'd never get there, all these different things, but while it is bespoke Xbox console hardware in it, I do think the R&D costs and all this stuff goes hand in hand with the long-term costs are very high, so they need to astronomically grow to make it a very profitable part of their business. I think they have been getting closer to that because they keep saying it's the fastest growing part of the business, and they keep doing it. One of the hardest things with Microsoft is we don't actually know any of the numbers outside of FTC leaks. We wouldn't have known a lot of stuff that was happening. So when you take their own words at a time where they were saying we're awful and terrible and everyone covering games bought it, it wasn't great. I think it can get there. I just think so much of the focus right now and everything we've seen, the assumptions you can make around gaming, especially at Microsoft, is that they have very high targets they have to hit, and they're not going to want to lose money because they have to hit these targets. Like, that was one of the quotes that came from the Sarah Bond focus piece yesterday, is that a lot of people internally feel like now that they've had so many investments and coupled with the COVID bubble going down, that internally everyone's like, okay, well, numbers were rising like crazy during COVID, and so we got to be hitting these. And everyone's like, well, no, actually it started going down because people started going out more and spending less on entertainment. It all just combines to where I don't think they as a company are interested in loss leading, for at least for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I can agree to that.
Man, you're making good points. I'm looking through the gamesindustry.biz article that kind of has some of those quotes, and then I did see the Sarah Bond stuff that came out yesterday. It's one of those things, and I think we talked about it at the beginning of the show, where tracking it is super fascinating and figuring out kind of like how they're operating and like what it is they're doing. It also makes me wonder, is it just first party that's having to deal with this, or are third parties having to make considerations for keeping servers online and stuff? Because we see them shut down third party games all the time after a certain amount of play or usage, if they've got a sequel on the way. If they don't, obviously Concord is, I think, the outlier, but it does happen to other games too, where they not going to make a profit, not going to hit costs, shut it down right away. I think Xbox's Redfall is kind of a good example of that, which I'm still bummed about.
Thankfully, they did. There has been more of a push to get offline modes into stuff. They did it with Redfall. They got an offline mode in there, so in case those servers are ever shut down, you can just play offline still. Mm-hmm. The Crew, they're promised after taking the Crew 1 down, mm-hmm. that the Crew 2, they're going to put an offline mode in, because like with Forza Horizon, all those car and music licenses, real pain in the butt in video games. It is always different than movies, because movies and TV shows have a lot of publishing houses that just straight up own using that music in the product, and they don't have to worry about it. And that is not how it works in gaming. It's a lot more restrictive. So, like, I mean, we've seen it, we've talked about it so much, and it's happened so much it's easy to forget, but like, everyone's firing people everywhere. The only places you can't easily lay people off, and industry people get mad if you say fire, but it's real people losing their job. They just get a better compensation package and a nicer thing to put on their resume than fired. But like, everyone everywhere except for in Japan, where it is just legally very hard, are laying people off. In Japan, and not at Nintendo. Like, Nintendo is one of supposedly the best places to work at, especially the culture there is more focused on just be at your job all the time as part of the culture. But treat your employees terrible to the point where they quit is the equivalent of laying them off for countries where it's a lot harder to fire people. Not saying it happens anywhere in particular. It's just that is like the known thing. Put someone in a terrible job they hate and hope they quit is the equivalent of sending out your, oh, this is so rough, we're gonna have to fire another 1,000 people. I feel terrible about it type of emails that are just press releases that are going to be leaked. But yeah, the whole industry right now is mostly trending towards small teams trying to hit it big. Like Astrobot's 60 people. So even if that game sells a few million, it's only 60 people. It wasn't 2,000 people at Ubisoft working on Star Wars Outlaws across 20 different teams. And if that game sells 2 million, it's a massive bomb. Like, I do think, and Matt Booty's talked about it a lot, and it has been a big thing he's noticed from third parties, especially like Local Thunk with Balatro and the guy who did Abiotic Factor and a bunch of those other single person 10 people teams. If you've got a budget of I'm doing this in my spare time, or we've got a couple $100,000 that we've got 5 people working on this for a while as a passion project, and then it sells 10 million copies on Steam, like those are the type of hits and things I think we'll see the industry shift to. We've already heard about them.
Yeah, Obsidian.
Yeah, and with them talking about Activision trying to make smaller incubation teams to focus on all the IP they have, and you can do a Crash game that is smaller. Because I think that was one of the things that hurt Toys for Bob was the insistence on big, huge AAA and higher up, and keep hiring and hiring, and we've seen that time and time again. And I think as horrible as it is, because like even the recent 650 people, that's 650 real people. But they almost doubled their headcount during COVID and into the acquisition time period. Like they went from 8,000 people to reportedly upwards of 17,000 people. Everyone was just hiring like crazy, and half the time you're hiring just to keep people away from other companies. And so now we're finally seeing everything deflate, and real people are the ones that have to pay for it.
You know, I have a question, I guess, for both of you, because I consistently look at PlayStation and remasters, because that's the meme thing, is that they only have remasters and re-releases right now because of their shift in strategy and how much it takes to make a single player AAA game experience right now. And I look at the parallels to the Switch and the Wii U, and like they brought all the Wii U's best games to Switch, sold like hotcakes. They're bringing a lot of the PS4's best games to PS5 remasters, like quick cash, fast things. Stick with me. They're remastering a lot of stuff, and that's become a memed joke that, like, you know, in passing, I'll joke with, you know, trophy room friends and stuff, but it's quick cash and almost guaranteed money. Dead Rising Remaster just came out for from Capcom. That's a fast thing for companies to put out their stuff, and I wonder if that's them trying to, I guess, balance out just how expensive it is to make bigger games. And I'm just curious if you guys see any parallels there, because I think it couples well with the idea of layoffs, because layoffs are our quick short-term benefits to keep costs down. And so I wonder if you all see parallels there, or maybe I'm stretching the logic too far.
I'm not seeing the parallels. We're looking at a console that did 14 million units in its lifetime sales with some really banger games, compared to a console that did 140 million units, and they just didn't time their cadence, their release cadence well enough. So yeah, I'm not seeing the parallels between like the Nintendo and like Sony releasing their games. No, I will say that I am upset that Sony is doing the due diligence of like releasing all of their games from their last generation as like PS5 remasters and stuff. And I'm sitting here like, where's Gears 2? Where's Gears 3? I just saw God of War Ragnarok on Steam. I'm sitting here wondering why Halo 5 isn't available on Steam. Like, it seems like PlayStation's doing a lot of work to try and cater to the PS5 owners for the PS4 library that they don't have at the moment. I don't know, you know, maybe they could have gone and bought a PS4 disc and just gotten smart delivery or something like that, but it just seems a little ridiculous that we're not getting like these Gears remasters. But sorry, Jesse, go ahead.
We kind of got Gears remasters in the like if you play Gears 3 with back compat at 4K and 60, it is mind-blowing. I mean, maybe 30 actually.
Yeah, but it doesn't have the Xbox Series X like box out there, and really that's what I want. I want to have
that's the benefit of a remaster, I think, is that you can sell it versus the FPS boost and the 4K and the HDR.
Yeah, well, it depends. If as a customer, I'm happier with Microsoft's setup of they patched all their recent games to just run better on the new hardware. They didn't re-release them. Everything just looks and runs a lot better. Like everything got a patch pretty much that had come out around like the year or two before the series consoles hit, even longer. But like if you're going to remaster Days Gone and you're going to remaster Horizon Zero Dawn, at that point, I'm just like, I can't go along with that. Like that game, Days Gone already looks and runs well on a PS5. It got a patch for it. Like I don't. For them, I think for Sony on a lot of this stuff, it has been we put out everything we could at the beginning of the generation to try and kill it, and we did. We sold a bunch more.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have anything for a while. We hit it hard with Helldivers 2. Stellar Blade seemingly did okay. It was a game they saved that wasn't going to be able to come out if they hadn't published it. They've missed with more than they've hit recently, but people are like, oh, they've earned the right for that. So they'll hand wave it away. So they just hit this remaster machine so hard. And in some cases, it makes sense. They want to get The Last of Us on PC. They will milk their PS5 audience first and then put it on PC a little bit later. Days Gone is everywhere, though. Horizon Zero Dawn is everywhere. Mm-hmm. These games are already on PC. So at that point, you are just trying to milk your audience to a crazy extent. Like Microsoft doesn't do a ton of remasters or remakes, but they make sure they're getting their things just always work. Like you can go back to a lot of their stuff and it is there and it will work. Like you can't play a bunch of PlayStation 3 games natively on the PS4 or the PS5, but you can play a bunch of the 360 games natively on the Series and the One consoles. It's just a very different approach, with one of them, I think, being far more customer friendly, even if it isn't. You're not properly milking the money out of your audience. Like I would actually prefer that wasn't the case. And a lot like with microtransactions, and people always complain, why are they all focused on doing live service games? It's like, if you put out a single player game and a live service game and they bomb, you've lost the same amount of money. But if you put out a single player game that does well and a live service game that does well, the live service game is just going to make way more money. So that's why they start focusing on that. They focus on what people will give more money. I'd rather let live service games be the things that make more money and stop milking the older stuff unless it is so old that it would really benefit from a remake. Like the Dead Space remake is the best version of that game. The RE4 remake is the best version of that, and it's new in a lot of ways. So I'm a big fan of actual remakes and not just graphical boosts for the sake of it.
I will say that I was joking definitely about the strategy that Sony's coming out with. I think that for me, the thing that would sell me on the remasters is if they actually came out and said, hey, we've gone back, we've went ahead and done like some remasters and some texture uprises, but the thing that we're going to be doing with this version is we're going to be looking to add in content that wasn't originally available, or create accessibility modes and options that weren't previously possible thanks to the Project Leonardo controller. That would be something that I would say, like, okay, if you're bringing out Horizon, first off, bring it out at the Horizon cost that, you know, like that we expect it to be. Like if it was 60 on PS4 and you're just remastering it, just leave it at 60. Don't try and chill me for, or scout me for the 70.
It's also, it's a game you can get for like $5, so even 60 is crazy.
Yeah,
like 30.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, and you know, tack on an extra 10 for the Sony tax of we believe in generations, and I'll pay that if you can sell me on the fact that we have a PS5 controller that is built around accessibility, and we went ahead and had a team of engineers go in and create specific features that are just designed to help try and improve accessibility for that game. Something like a goodwill measure behind that, as opposed to we're just going to, I think what was it, Last of Us 1 part 1 did a really good job of adding a lot of accessibility features that weren't originally in the first one, and then they brought a lot of that over to the part 2. Naughty Dog, very smart when it comes to marketing like a remake or a remaster for that set. And I think to your point, and Luke, I think you'll definitely agree with me on this, that Capcom probably does the best job of remake or like remaster, new title, remake, remaster, new title, remake, remaster, and actually like build the cadence as they fill out that gap of like, okay, we need time for these games to get made. They're going to be in RE engine, so it's going to be easier. But at least in the meantime, you have something to play while we work on the next Resident Evil.
So yeah, that's Capcom. I think is a great example of this, specifically because as a Resident Evil fan or just a fan of the games that Capcom makes, you can go to the Resident Evil franchise and get great playable versions of games that came out way back when. And to similar to Jesse's point about like Dead Space, like Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes, you could go play them and have a very similar experience to what you had then, but it's new enough, accessible enough, playable enough that you can have a blast just enjoying it right now. And so you can go and enjoy over half the Resident Evil franchise and expect new content to come in the form of Resident Evil 7, 8, 9, and so on. And so there's something to that for sure. And I want more of that in there. And, I see it. I saw you just spotlight it. The Halo Master Chief Collection, I thought was great at letting you do the same thing, enter into the world of Halo and play these games in very playable form. And there's that to me is very special. So
yeah, I would agree. It's nice to have the one thing that I do love is that Xbox allows so much back compat with all of their titles, and it's all connected to your account. So yes, you don't necessarily need to have that remaster because you can still have access to the game, and that's fantastic. But at the same time, it also doesn't stop me from going, because I just did go back to some of the Gears games like about a year or so ago, and playing through 2 and 3, there was a stark difference between the way Judgment looked, or not Judgment, 1, the remaster for 1 looked, and I was just like, man, I kind of want like a fresh coat of paint on some of these games, and stuff. But at the same time, if they're going to be working on E-Day, I'd much rather them just work on E-Day, because at least it's a new installment, and I'm totally fine with them not doing it. But if they do something where like Obsidian takes these smaller teams and says like, okay, we're going to build Grounded, or whatever next little project they want to make beyond those games, and say like, hey, would you guys be interested in going in and freshening up some of the old Gears games to kind of get people ready to jump into 1, 2, and 3 after they jump into E-Day? So that way there's like a nice chronological flow through those titles. I'd be like, yeah, green like that. That'd be fantastic.
I do want to supposedly, according to Nick, they have been working on it, and he announced it way too soon. But there is some form of compilation of the original Gears trilogy. Who knows what it ends up being?
I hope so, because I work in a school with students, and when I was like, E-Day, it looks so cool. And they were like, what's Gears of War? And I'm like,
It's the pop game that was on mobile a while ago.
You're breaking my soul
I do think
here.
there's also a difference. You have your remaster where you're just making things look and run better, but it's the original game otherwise. You have your graphical remake where you're putting a new engine on top of the old game, like Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster, where they've got the game running in RE Engine, but it is the exact same game with some quality of life improvements and more voiced cutscenes. So they had to redo all the voices in the game. Like the more you add, like if you're going to remake Halo 2 and Halo 3 and Halo 1, that's a very long, expensive project because those games were huge. Like they were very big games for the time. They weren't just a linear story. Are you remaking the multiplayer? Are you remaking the Forge mode? Like, how much work are you doing for these things? It's going to be a ton. And that adds up. What is the return on investment? That's where I think Capcom's very smart. You look at their collections and they're pretty bare bones. They add in rollback netcode. They give you a bunch of cool galleries and they give you the games and they look and they play well, but it's not an expensive project because they do not expect them to sell a ton. I think the Marvel vs. Capcom one will do okay. Even then, if it breaks 1 million, I wouldn't. They've only had 1 or 2 collections do that broke 1 million. Like they're properly scoped. So I do think with older AAA, the scope goes up. You have so much higher expectations. What makes sense for a full remake versus would a remaster of Gears 3 really look that different from it running on a Series X right now? No, but if you can get it on PC, get Gears 2, Gears 3, and a better version of Gears 1, because the games for Windows or games for Gold shit sucks on the old version, like if you get those versions on PC, that's when I think it really makes sense. If you get the other Fable games on PC, that's where it really makes sense. Like your stuff that hasn't been everywhere you are now, and you've got fan bases and people that use your app on PC now that just have never had an Xbox, and or they are freaking like 10, and so they have no idea what a Fable 2 even was. Like getting more for them is where I think they should focus on going back to old stuff.
So Bison, I agree with you, Jesse, in a lot of ways, especially because I work with kids and they need to be reintroduced to franchises. And had there been a Fallout collection, a Fallout 3, Bison was asking about like rumored remake remasters in development kind of thing. Had there been something there, more people could have jumped in. And I'm curious what you guys are thinking as far as, and Jesse, you did mention some, but what Xbox franchises could benefit from that remake remaster treatment, both on the consumer side, but also for Xbox, because to your point, remastering Halo 2 or remaking Halo 2, that's a lot of money spent. What's your dividend? What's your benefit? What's your ROI on it? And so there is a lot to
and they're only a
process.
decade out from having done a graphical upgrade on Halo 2. Like they just did one.
Yep.
Halo 3 is the one that never got one. In the Fallout games, anything Bethesda would only be graphical update, because those games are so simulation heavy. They are not going to remake them, because then it is essentially you are making a new Fallout game. So just go make a new one. Like go make a New Vegas 2. Don't make a remake of an old one. So
the Halo 2, Logan's put in our private chat, was November 9th, 2004. And then they had the Master Chief Collection's uptick, which was very impressive because I remember they linked it to some of the cutscenes there were done by Blur that parried well with Halo 5, and then didn't count canon wise, which I thought was funny. But nonetheless, interesting. Logan, any specific franchises you want to see remade?
I would love for Sea of Thieves to get remade. I think that game is great, but that game is
I hate him.
2018 and it's like falling apart at the seams right now. They just can't pack enough in there. So I'd love to have them like remake Sea of Thieves and Unreal Engine 5 with a better online infrastructure and packaging and streaming systems. That'd be great. Yeah. No, as far as like franchises and stuff, I would honestly just think like stick to the pillar franchises that we've got. Keep Halo, Gears relevant, Forza relevant. Stuff like that is easy in my mind. If I had to like dip into more obscure stuff, I'm still like a fan of Mech Assault games. I would love for them to come and like pull those and start making mech games relevant.
There's a new one coming.
Is there?
Yep,
like
Mech Assault
Mech
5
Assault?
Clans? What's the name of it? Oh, I'm thinking Mech Warrior. Never mind. Ignore me.
Okay. I saw the Mech Warrior.
They're very
look cool.
close. Yeah.
But the Mech Assault was one that I always was like, oh, I love Mech Assault back in the day. That was such a fun franchise, but stuff like that. But, we were talking about Plucky Squire and having content that is for adults, but also a very childlike thing. And Jesse, I think to your point, you're absolutely correct. Back in the day when we wanted to play games, we would have our friends come over and we would pass the controller because it was a single player game. Kids don't come over to each other's houses as much anymore. They're always just online with games like that. So really it's the adults wanting the games that we used to play for our kids, but we aren't necessarily like giving those to them because they're not interested in those single player games nearly as much because that's not where their friends are. But I think something like, Blinks the Time Sweeper, Banjo-Kazooie, Viva Pinata, some of those ones that are just kind of like
they're very young, like almost like preschooler can play this type of thing. I think it has a better chance than teenager or adolescent even half the time.
Yeah. Anyone above any like most of the people I fight in Sea of Thieves are all like 10 to 13. So like I'm constantly like that's where they go.
Yeah. It's one of the things we run into a lot where like one of the best games this year was Banishers Ghosts of New Eden. New IP,
so
third
good.
person, great game, incredible story, incredible acting, incredible music.
They needed to tighten it up like tech wise though.
Yeah,
was my
but
issue.
it is a small team. It was a smaller team pushing into that high AA, low AAA boundary of budget, and it's the thing everyone always says they want. But then
Yeah.
it comes out and they don't support, and like, I'll get it when it's on sale. It's like, okay,
was
then you're
so
not.
good.
Then you're not supporting it. You're late support, and I get it. There's a bajillion games, especially if you've got Game Pass or PS Plus. You've got a bajillion things to play all the time. Understood. But if you really want to support new single player games, it does mean buying them at full cost, because that's the only time that they can make their budget back. You see it with Spider-Man. Spider-Man 2 needed 7 million people to buy it for $70 to break even. And you can lower those numbers. Banishers might have needed 1 million people at full price to make its budget. I don't know. But full budget is 2 or 3 times more than what most people are probably going to end up buying that game at. So we rarely see the money put where the mouths are with online discourse. And I get it. Shit's expensive. Just don't pretend that it's what everyone wants. It's what you want.
Luke, we've talked about this in the past, and I think this is kind of interesting because looking at some of the remasters that they're doing versus the Plucky Squire reviews, things like this, we've and to this point, we've talked about like Hellblade. A lot of people saying like gaming experiences need to be shorter and more so that you can actually like finish the games. I would say that this is like a perfect example of, I'm starting to see the trend where Microsoft is especially with like Jesse, what you mentioned, Matt Booty's comments about the smaller teams, having smaller teams building smaller experiences for Game Pass and for cross-platform, I think is what's really going to benefit Xbox in the next like 10 years compared to what we've been seeing, which is like some of these, you know, AAA masterpieces like God of War Ragnarok or Spider-Man 2, things like that, where these sequels have like a built-in expectation that's like, I still haven't bought Spider-Man 2 because I haven't finished Miles Morales because I don't want to skip on the story. Whereas I think if like Spider-Man 2 was named like Spider-Man Venom, it probably would have sold better because there wouldn't have been an expectation of like, oh, you need to go play through 1 if you want to understand what's going to be going on in Spider-Man 2, where I don't think that that's necessarily the case. But do you think going into the next generation, having smaller games, having smaller scopes are going to be better, especially if we're looking at a potential where they're going to be doing a handheld like the Steam Deck, where people are going to want to have something that's a smaller experience on a more mobile kind of platform or a form factor?
So outside of their pillar franchises, yes, I think it's important. Like Hellblade, not a pillar franchise, despite my wishing that it was. Shorter, smaller experience, right?
Yeah.
Gears of War E-Day, that is going to have multiplayer. It's going to have PvP. It's likely going to have PvE because of Horde mode. That's 3 pillars. Call of Duty, campaign, multiplayer PvP, Warzone, zombies. That's PvE. Like you're going to have the bigger titles are going to have those lots of different aspects to it. They're going to be big and expensive, but the shorter games that are not pillar franchises, absolutely, I think that'll benefit Xbox, particularly if they don't cost as much to develop, shorter development times, smaller experiences, and then one hits big, right? You know, one hits big, people are really into it. There you go. I think that the potential benefit is much higher, particularly if you can put it into a Switch style experience. And let's not forget, Switch sold on the Breath of the Wild. That is a big game, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, there's give and take to it. I don't think it's a silver bullet, one size fits all answer, but there is something to that. I love a good short game. When I was like, I'm on this spooky trend right now, and so I rated Game Pass for spooky games. When I saw how long the medium was, and I was like, yeah, okay, shorter experience, not a 30-hour thing. I can go in and have a good time, see what this thing has to offer. I'm there for it.
Did
right?
you jump into it?
Medium, I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really am enjoying it a lot. Not enjoying Little Nightmares, by the way. Don't like that. I'm still so bad because Anubis messaged me. He's like, I can't wait for you to check this out. And I hate when it doesn't click. But shorter experiences are important, I think. but because you have less to lose, people are able to bounce out easier and write it off. But I do really hate when people say Hellblade's too short, I'm done. No, that's not the reason to be done, right? Hellblade's, you're not getting your money's worth and whatnot. They priced it accordingly, right? Plucky Squire priced accordingly. I think there's a middle ground in all of that. And did you miss out by paying $20 on Tales of Gensera Zal? We're getting what is it? Prince of Persia DLC appropriately priced.
I reviewed it.
You did, okay. Yeah. I saw.
Some people try calling it an expansion. It is a mission. So there's the one other member of the Immortals, the assassin with the mask, that you never fought in the main game. This is them finally finishing that. So it's like 3 to 6 hours. It's still pretty chunky for being $5.
I was gonna say, like, to me, that is chunky for $5, but worth your time. And so I think about game length. To me, shorter is better. And unless you're a multiplayer experience, there you go. Like there's no silver bullet answer here. So that's kind of my non-answer to your question.
Fair.
It's a non-answer. And shout out to our chat, by the way. We are big fans of sevens here because there's a lot of great, fun, and enjoyable games you can enjoy that where you critically might not land at 9 out of 10 or whatnot. You can play so many great games. And The Quarry getting shout outs, Banishers getting love in chat, Medium people enjoying Artful Escape, and to Jesse's comment in chat as well. So many shorter experiences this year. I love that. I think that's
I keep a list of I'll put in the private chat. I keep a list that I try to keep updated. It's everything that's in Game Pass, but just going through and looking, like in January there was Turnip Boy Robs a Bank, a really fun 4 or 5 hour game. Go Mecha Ball I beat. I beat it in about 3 hours, but it's got good incentive to keep going through it. Like Rotato, there Return to Grace.
I'm going to put your list into our chat because this is a great list.
Yeah, there's so many. They've had their story games. They had The Quarry and Return to Grace was fun. Open Roads was, you can beat in like a friggin' hour. Botany Manor's not super long. Harold Halibut was actually a little bit too long. But if you go through this list, Still Wakes the Deep, like they have had
I enjoyed that. Yeah.
So many shorter experiences that you might not want to buy because they are shorter, but I've got the subscription service. They got paid to be in it day one. Right. I go and play it. Depending on the deal they have, they might get paid a little more. Like, you don't have to feel bad. You are supporting them by playing the thing that they signed a deal for. And there has been so much. There's been a really good variety on the platform this year. And I think that does get lost a lot because industry coverage is wholly first-party focused for Sony and Microsoft, with Sony having more of their first-party also be de facto third-party exclusives that Microsoft generally get through Game Pass. But people covering games, and it happens with me all the time now. I've only bought like 1 or 2 games in the last couple of years. I've spent thousands of hours earning all the codes that are sent to us for review, because time is money, friend. But there are so many varied experiences on every platform that I think the casual gamer ends up feeling a bit overwhelmed. And I do think that's one of the reasons you've actually seen a little less in Game Pass, because they kind of went crazy up through July, and they've slowed down a little bit, and that's probably going to be a little crazy to end the year. It's never been better to play video games now, which is what always drives me crazy on when people want to be so negative about every platform. And it's like, if you just like video games, every platform's incredible. They all have so much to play.
Yes, 100%. I went nuts because I'm a teacher, so I was off this summer, and I played Still Wakes the Deep, Kunitsugami, Flintlock. Gosh, there's one other, Lords of the Fallen, like back to back, all Game Pass. Which there was so much stuff, and then
Lords of the Fallen, one of my favorite games.
God damn, it's good. It.
Yeah, it's really incredible. I will never understand the reviews on that one. I gave it a 9.4. Maybe I'm a little high, but I played like 50 hours of it before launch. Quite a bit of it in co-op with Zach from Windows Central. And man, if you are into Dark Souls 3, you will like Lords of the Fallen 2023.
I thought the same. But then, like, look ahead. Like one of the we need two things I need to talk about to make sure I justify our thumbnail, which was the lawsuits, but also what's coming. And I do want to point out that like you've got Black Ops 6 on the way into Game Pass. You've got Starfield's expansion, which you get a nice little discount on if you're going to dive into it. Good coverage coming out on that one, by the way. It's got a horror vibe, which I'm into, but like Shattered Space is on the way.
There's
Indiana
some scary
Jones
stuff.
Yeah, Indiana Jones is
I
coming.
hope I get
also
Shattered
into Game
Space
Pass.
soon. I really want to review that one.
I hope it does come through as well. So, but I would imagine you guys get it
Luke,
first.
are you taking that or?
No, you may have as many as you like, Logan, because I'm gonna do Black Ops 6, but you are you have
that's why I'm wondering. That's why, because I'll find another loop where I've got Andreja as my bay on that and get playthrough. We'll go venture into the Great Snake.
Hey man, I'm so stoked for it, and you can review as much as you want. Side note, guys, check out his review of Plucky, Squire, and Creatures of Ava. He worked hard on both of them.
Banishers. All
and
stuff we
Banishers.
talked about.
Yep, that one's in there. And then, I'm gonna just tangentially say, my Keylocker interview. Now that Keylocker's out, more people are checking it out, which I'm appreciative of. Yeah. But also, I have 2 interviews in the works. One I can't say; it's a secret, but it's been long requested. And then another one that's in the works with the Retro Realms team, because they're putting out that Halloween Ash versus the Evil Dead side scroller, which I'm so excited for. I just think that's fun.
It just looks good.
But Jesse, I'm sure you know the dangers of announcing an interview too early. So there's one I'm sitting on, and I don't want to say it, but I'm so stoked for it. So.
I'm just jealous that you get to talk to Sarah. That's all.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, right. I wish. So guys, let me ask you this: we saw Nintendo, officially coming out suing the developers of Palworld, Pocket Pair, for not copyright infringement, as I think many people might assume and presume, given the nature of Pokemon and the PALs, but rather for patent infringement, which I thought was interesting. I found the timing just kind of odd on this one because it's been out for so long, and it's coming to PlayStation, and I wonder if this is why Xbox avoided necessarily slapping Palworld onto a box or a sticker for the Series S or something. But now, they're going to have to go to court with Nintendo, and Nintendo rarely loses. I don't know. I don't have a take on this other than I think Nintendo's they're vicious, man. They're vicious.
Nintendo are patent trolls. They just have patented very basic game mechanics, and seemingly the way it works in Japan, where they filed the lawsuit, they can just troll about the most basic things. Like some of the worst patents out there are the very basic assed video game mechanics. Like we lost loading game mini games forever because Namco did it, and now we don't have loading screens very much anymore, so no one bothers. It's just one of those things where it's they waited until Palworld made a bunch of money, and then okay, we've got a patent for something kind of similar to your game, but it's actually probably a lot closer to Temtem and other games. They're using their way to bully others to try and just destroy them. Like they did it to a mobile game that had a question when you come back from your phone turning off and it says, "Do you want to continue?" They have that patent. If the screen turns off and it says, "Do you want to continue?" type of message. And they won in court against one of the biggest mobile games that had nothing else to do with any of their IP or anything. They just are patent trolls, it would appear.
Luke, you remember when everyone was pissed off that Warner Brothers was trying to patent the Nemesis system?
Yes.
In Lord of the Rings?
Yep.
That's what this feels like.
Yeah, Order.
Yeah.
The U.S. law is all about precedent, and if you don't try and defend your thing, you're essentially saying, "Here, take it."
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it's similar in Japan, except for these patents aren't something so deep, and also I don't think Warner ever used it's you have to show that you would defend it so that people won't just take it as their own, because if you set a precedent, someone took it, I didn't fight it immediately, then you will never win again. It's why Bethesda's never going to give the big thumbs up to Fallout London. They'll just completely ignore it because they can't set that precedent for anyone to come in and use the Fallout name in the way that Fallout London did. The moment you try and make any money, they will always go after you, which is what we saw with like Yuzu and stuff. But laws are stupid. They are designed quite often by lawyers to give them a reason to keep existing so that you can go after things real hard. For whatever reason you feel like, whenever you feel like. The pedantic nature of Nintendo using these patents, unless it's really some smoking gun we don't know. It just feels like they wanted to wait a while and figured a way that they could go after this company because it really wasn't copyright infringement. You don't have to change things that much to avoid it.
10%.
It's just such a bummer because the Nemesis system, Logan, as you brought up, would have been such a great addition to so many other games. Like, as a diehard Arkham fan, God, I would have loved that. Crime bosses with agendas against Batman or Nightwing or something like that would have been so cool to see. I know it's going to be there in the new Wonder Woman. I see Kanoa's name or Kanoa in chat referencing that. It's just a bummer because mini games and loading screens were fun. You know, little tricks and whatnot did kind of up the level. And I know a lot of people in our Discord really loved Palworld. What a shame it would be if they just outmuscle them in court and financially make them destitute just because they can, because Palworld happens to be popular. How many other Pokemon ripoffs exist out there, right? Like Flappy Bird's reignited its thing because the IP was abandoned, but like it uses assets from Mario. It's just a really big bummer. For sure. And I hate when I see stuff like this that goes against the spirit of video games for the consumers, which is to play and enjoy. I know for companies it can be to make money, but man, it's heartbreaking, I think, to see stuff like this happen. I just hate it. I hate it. And Nintendo kind of sucks. Like, I don't get it, man. I don't get it. I see shout out to this and what I think, and I want to say it again, the PS5 30th anniversary edition capitalizes on nostalgia in this beautiful way. Really think they look great. Nintendo sometimes just punches you in the balls with your nostalgia, and it's two different methods, and it just makes me bummed out.
Where's my Wind Maker? We're talking about like, okay, Horizon Zero Dawn is coming out with a remake, Nintendo. Where is my Wind Waker HD port? I want that game on Switch. I'm not buying a Wii U. Give me Wind Waker. Or I will find something cute and fluffy, and you do not want to see the images.
Oh boy, that was a threat, a real one. He meant it.
I want Wind Waker. I'm so sick of not having it.
Fair. Nintendo.
Anyway,
sucks.
sorry.
It bums me out.
Yeah, no, I think that this was definitely like they knew they wouldn't win the war when it comes to copyright because there's at least enough difference in the characters in Palworld that they wouldn't be able to attack that. So now they're going for the patent. And everyone was wondering, like, when was Nintendo going to sue Palworld? And it's like, the Palworld knew. That's why Xbox has the deal with them, because they look and they saw and they checked with their lawyers. And they said, hey, we want to get this Palworld game onto Game Pass. There's a potential that they might get sued by Nintendo for copyright infringement. Do you think that they have a court and case? And their Microsoft lawyers probably took a look at it and said, no, it's legally distinct enough that they don't have to worry about it. So Xbox is like, cool, green light the deal. We'll have them on as an exclusive and we'll just go from there. Now Nintendo's coming out with a patent and they're saying, hey, we have a patent for throwing a ball at an animal. And it's like, okay, so that's your grounds for suing? That seems a little petty, but what do I know? It's not like there's any other games out there that do anything like that. So why not pick on Palworld?
Yeah, and it's not just Microsoft, it's also Sony signed a deal with them to expand the Palworld universe with Aniplex and their music. Like, I think everyone knew, no, there's no copyright infringement here. So it just always comes down to Nintendo being a bully and doing what they do, and people are okay with it and still buy all their stuff and don't complain very much because they like the games they make.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Wind Waker needs to come out.
Yep. Logan's very passionate about this, but I don't blame you. There are plenty of games I want remastered. The irony of that to me is that I can sit on one side of a fence and be like, Nintendo and PlayStation are overdoing it with remasters and such. But then on the other hand, I'm like, I'm ready for Arkham. I'm ready for this franchise to make a comeback, that franchise to make a comeback. And so it's very much about what appeals. But to go back to a point we made well earlier in the show is that Capcom to me has done it the best because they are staggering between remaster / remake and new content. And that is the difference there. And it's rarely a 1-to-1 comparison regardless. So, I hope Pocket Pair is okay, by the way. Like, I sincerely do. I imagine they will be, given that Sony and Xbox have both poured money into their pockets and looked at different deals. But I just, Nintendo rarely loses in court. So it's just
You're not wrong.
on my mind. What's that?
You're not wrong. It sucks, though, because it's like, in some cases, I 100% agree. Like, go after the people that are actually taking like your content and making money off of it, as posing it as like their content and stuff like that. I understand like legal grounds for that, but a lot of these like patent ones, it feels like it's a little bit of like, what was it? The idea of like, imagine if Nintendo had patented the press A to jump.
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh,
like, it would imagine the amount of logistics just to try and get a jump into the game. It'd be ridiculous.
D-pad sucked forever because they had D-pad. Like,
yeah, they had the D-pad patent for
the
longest time. Yeah, they actually had like a patent that showed like there's a reason why D-pads on like the PlayStation were just 4 weird little shaped buttons and not a set like one piece cross, because they had the patent for the stupid D-pad.
I had no idea.
It's wild. It's legal stuff is wild, man. They'll do it if they can.
And they've been doing it forever, and they never get called out or have any problems with it. So people just give in.
That's because their IP is so strong.
Their IP is very strong.
And they can do 9 Mario spin-offs in a year, and people don't say all they are is Mario games. They're just like, ooh, Mario games.
But we'll definitely talk about other games being derivative of other stuff. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
The irony, we talked about story today. Very little story in Nintendo games, and some of them don't take longer than 7 hours, 6 hours to beat. And those are two things that show up regularly in PlayStation and Xbox debates, both sides of that fence. So it is interesting. They exist with a different set of rules, for better or worse. And
always worse.
Yeah.
For customers, it's worse. They make fun games, but they'd make fun games regardless. Mm-hmm. They never have their toes out to the fire. They are always, we'll just do whatever we want, whenever we want. And some people will go, yay, and then not realize that that's one of the things every company needs. Every company needs to have actual, checks and balances, and they don't have many. So
You're right. You were right. Well, I'm going to transition our topic into just a quick reference of a couple things here. Tokyo Game Show is next week. Xbox will be there. Phil Spencer came out with a video greeting
Konnichiwa.
Oh, he did say it. It was there. I wasn't going to say it, but you're right. It was very, he sounded interesting.
He's a white man.
Yeah, very white. White with an H. Pretty loud there. But Xbox will be there. They do have several of their partners. Activision Blizzard will be there. Bethesda will be there. I'm sure they'll show off a couple other different titles that we have coming, because we do have a lot of Xbox stuff on the way, which is really cool.
Yeah, they've talked about more Game Pass stuff there, because this was a very light month. So I wouldn't be shocked if we might get a game or two.
I think you're right. And I think we'll also see some Square Enix love here and there, one way or another, whether it's big stuff, small stuff. I think we'll get some.
I think Pixel remasters soon.
Mm-hmm.
Final Fantasy 16 less soon, but still soon.
Mm-hmm.
No mention of 7 remake for a while. That'll take a bit, because Square Enix is very strict in like who does their ports, and they had their 16 PC team on 16 PC, still a mess. They'll probably have shifted now to focusing on an Xbox port for that one, but the Pixel remasters they could have just done whenever, a lot easier. And then 7 remake, they're on Returnal, whatever the third one's going to end up being called. Jez was hinting that there is no actual direct reason left why remake couldn't come. Like there isn't you can't put any of these on Xbox until the trilogy's done type contracts. Again, it's just logistics of who's going to do it. And they've been doing a lot of restructuring and trying to focus less on the Rockstar producer stuff and more on teams and continuity. So hopefully it feels like everything that they've done that isn't Foam Stars or Forsaken or Forspoken was like 3 years actually of exclusivity on that when they signed.
So, well, Jesse, you don't think the Final Fantasy VII Xbox code already existed or was kind of
never
really
been touched? No, Square's. Look at how bad 7 Rebirth ran on PlayStation 5. Like, they're not a well-oiled machine. It took them getting a ton of GPU power and a better upscaler to make that game look appropriate for 2024. Like, it was a blurry mess.
That was the best showcase of the PS5 Pro.
Yeah, look, we fixed a game that was a horrible port. Like,
yeah, we
threw enough oomph at it to actually have a internal resolution above 720p on a home console. Like, they've really fallen on their face. Even like the new Final Fantasy 14 expansion, people aren't in love with. They're in a huge transition period, and their deep dedication to putting exclusives on PS4 and PS5 nearly killed them. People forget Babylon's Fall, and like there's been so many massive flops that they've done. And they went from Final Fantasy 15 being on everything, not even being that good at launch, being a lot better a year or two later, but selling a ridiculous amount of copies. And they went right into take the bag. Oh shit, this bag isn't nearly big enough. Oh God, what are we doing? Keep taking more of it. Oh no, it's not working. And having to completely turn around. And so they're in a transition period, and it's definitely going to take longer for them to get everything done.
It's wild to me too, because like when 16 launched, it was at the end of June that year that I remember, and there was like nothing. There was nothing in its way to like really just like steal the thunder. And I'm like, dude, what is going on? This should be like the big, like I hear more fervor for things like Monster World than Final Fantasy nowadays, unless it has a 7 next to it.
They made it a character action Game of Thrones game, and like that's not what the series you weren't playing to the diehards, and you weren't playing to anyone particular new. Like, character action games are actually kind of hard to sell a ton of. That's why Sony transitioned a lot of their stuff to the more action RPG. And they removed a lot of the RPG stuff. It wasn't aimed at any particular audience, and the only audience available for it was a hell of a lot smaller than last time. So it's just, when you're not day and date on PC, at the very least, it really hurts. But even a game like Stellar Blade didn't do crazy numbers. It just was a smaller team, so it didn't have to do crazy numbers. Final Fantasy is very expensive. But even, I think it was Danny Lamad said, this one wasn't unrealistic expectations like in the past. This one just didn't do very well. And same with Rebirth. They just actually didn't do very well. So, and Rebirth was always going to do worse. When you were the second game in a trilogy, it is rare to do better than the first game if you're super tied together story-wise. Like Mass Effect was an exception, but that's because it ended up being everywhere, unlike the first game.
First one, right.
But yeah, Square's in a really tough spot, and Xbox is coming in essentially to the rescue. So, like, if the Pixel remasters come over, I wouldn't be shocked if that's something that gets a Game Pass deal, more than maybe 16 or the other ones, because there might be way tougher contracts on, you've got to give us the right to get it on PS Plus first, like they have with a lot of Capcom stuff. Like why Resident Evil only goes in once it's going into PlayStation Plus, because they signed that horrible deal.
Capcom always is a conundrum to me, because on the one hand, Kunitsugami, Game Pass, day one, supporting stuff, Resident Evil, it's there. But then Marvel vs. Capcom and the fighting game stuff doesn't show up. And it's always...
their collections are how cheap can we do them? And once there was an update on the GDK that made it not work for the old MT framework, where no one's updating that that's why there's no PS5 version of them. It doesn't work on PS5. So it'll be Xbox One, it'll be PS4, Switch, and PC. And they will probably expect to sell like maybe 50,000 of them on Xbox. Like they don't expect to sell much. So the moment they have to pull people off and go and try and fix something, they're like, nope. And it finally got loud enough where Microsoft's like, okay, we'll help. As in time and money and workers, I am sure. So I think Capcom wants their stuff everywhere, but they're also, I don't think they're going to go back and do anything that didn't make it. I don't think they're going to go back and do Monster Hunter stories or anything because those won't sell any copies. It's not worth it.
Right. I agree. Alrighty, guys. Let's see. I want to one or two other things that are just kicking around here. If you have any questions in chat, guys, now is the time. Oh, did you guys see that Splinter Cell is making a comeback as the animated series? Guys, they will do anything but make a game for this.
Hey, they're working on it. They've talked about it before. Was it Montreal? They're doing a remake.
I don't believe them, Jesse.
Oh no, it is. I promise you, it is.
I've seen mobile.
They announced it. They announced it the moment they started doing it. So obviously it's not close, but it was still a couple years ago. So give it 2-3 years. I don't think it'll be. They had a problem where they were trying to do some remakes and stuff like the Prince of Persia, Sands of Time one, where the people that were hiring to do it did not do very well. So they had to bring it in house. So I do think with Splinter Cell, they're like, okay, we're gonna spin up a team. Kind of like they did with the Division 2, because the Division 2 had ended, and then people were buying it nonstop, and they're like, oh shit. So they spun up a team, have done one good expansion, are putting out another expansion next year. Like once Ubisoft says they're going to make something, they generally make it, even if it's Skull and Bones level, which is actually okay. It's not a terrible game. It's all right.
It's a decent game. Skull and Bones. It's functionally, it does everything that you'd expect.
On land stuff. Bad.
The on-land stuff has always been bad though. That ever since like they were like the beta
so
stuff.
Weird. I don't know why.
Yeah,
but the actual like, say what you will about the corporate culture there and how terrible it is, but the actual games they put out, they support well, and if they say they're going to do something, they generally do it. So I think we'll see a Splinter Cell remake in a few years.
Will it be the next Xbox launch title?
It'll be on everything because everything we were going to get cross-gen again.
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder, man. Like, one, forward compatibility, dope. Back compatibility needs to be a thing. But cross-gen, sometimes I wonder, man. Like, I wonder if that hurt the PS5, Xbox Series SX generations.
It hurts hardware sales, but they're making way more money than ever. So no. Even when people say Xbox is dying, it's like they're making way more money than they used to. They're fine. You're just looking at corporations who want to grow. They're making more. They just want to make more than more. That's the consternation.
The Sarah Bond thing where it's like they had like the little line and it was going, oh, let me try and do this. Like it was going like this and then it spiked for COVID. And then it came down to like right here and they're like, we have to find new ways to monetize and make money. And I'm like, yeah, but you guys were like down here with the Xbox One. Like this is still higher. Just account for this where you were here.
The actual economic system in America is you have to try and make more.
Oh, I know.
Legally, you have to try and be getting more value for your shareholders. So, like, unless they had gone below that line and they're like, okay, let's at least get back to that line. And it's like, no, we were super high and shareholders were happy and not complaining. COVID bubble burst. Shit. We'll turn on the fire everyone's spigot. And until now that's run out because we actually need people to make stuff. Though I'm sure they can always find more people to fire. Yeah, it's just... It is unsustainable.
Jacob?
Yeah.
Jacob in the back. Is he still around? We need to have a got to make sure that our profits are up.
We got a question from channel member Abdel114. Thank you for being a channel member. He says, okay, legit question. Why are games not cheaper than before? You might have just answered this. In the SNES days, most went to manufacturing of cartridges, not the publisher. Today, we download games without retailers. Margins are higher now. Ooh, who wants this one? Who wants this one?
I mean, it's more expensive now to make games, just by default. Like, your big games are made by like 20, 30 people. And now your big games are made by 2,000 to 3,000 sometimes. Like, we are very lucky that costs have gone down compared to the cartridge days.
You were talking a little bit about Microsoft, and when we were having our discussion about cloud and Microsoft pushing cloud. Looking at what Microsoft is pushing now, I would say that one of the tools that they are looking to actually use to help keep costs down for gaming is going to be AI, because it seems like Microsoft is very focused on AI. And Phil Spencer's probably been having conversations with how they can start trying to implement AI as a way to build games in new and interesting ways that will help kind of keep costs down so that you'll have asset generation, pre-production, viz stuff work like that. Like, we're probably going to see more and more AI find its way into gaming as tools to help kind of build stuff so that you don't have to have as big of teams and still get content at the level to make sure that games aren't going up to 80, 90 bucks American dollars.
Can you figure out how to make it help with your efficiency versus replace people? Because it will not be good enough to replace anyone and be anywhere near their quality.
Yeah.
But that is the cheapest way, and the way that a lot of executives would want to use is like, oh, we don't need a support staff anymore. We've got a chatbot. And then the chatbot says, yeah, you can buy this truck for $5,000. And then they're legally stuck having to do that, which has actually freaking happened. Like, making sure that the buzzword, because the buzzword was blockchain and NFT, and that died because it never made any sense. AI makes more sense in very specific help people's production ways. But if, okay, you're doing 20% more work, we can like fire 10% of our workforce now. Then you're just right back where you were. You're not actually better. You're just saving some costs because you're a little more efficient. That means more people or less people doing more work, like that style. If they push for that, I think there will be pushback. But again, these corporations just end up getting away with everything they want in the end most of the time. So I would really hope that the FTC keeps up what they have been doing. And even if they were off the mark with the ABK deal, because they just didn't understand the industry well enough, they are in the right realm of thinking. Like, that is, these are the types of deals you've got to be really heavily scrutinizing. And these are the types of job-changing technologies you have to have good barriers in place on. And even in China, they've just put up a bunch of rules about how AI can work and what it's allowed to do and what legal copyright is. Because if there's generative AI and stuff right now, you don't have a copyright. It's like, I generatively AI made this song. Okay, you don't own it. Anyone can have that song. You can never claim it. So figuring all that type of stuff out is going to be really important. And knowing American laws and how it works, it's going to be a lot of companies paying a lot of money to a lot of different politicians to try and get it to work on their end of things. So I'm worried.
I'm more concerned less about AI yet because it's so expensive to dive into. But I would prefer if the FTC were to focus on anything right now, I think digital rights needs a lot more addressal, given how many services are offering purchases of products that we don't actually own. Over something like how many people are, or like what is the legal distinction between AI generated content that a company builds in-house off of their artists that feed the algorithm or feed the database that they use to then generate content, versus, you know, like other aspects of like AI where it's a little more questionable about where they got that source from that. Because I think even there was some fervor going on on Discord, or no, the Discord around Destiny 2. There's like artists that have come out and said like, hey, this is our content. You guys have actually taken our content and are having artists who are like using that as they're selling to you, when in actuality they just stole my content and are now selling it to you for your artwork and stuff like that. So
there was two. It was the Ace of Spades Nerf gun. Somebody at Nerf just used someone's drawing, and then one of the Final Shape artworks. Yeah, they had some artwork in there. And it's always tougher on licenses because you've never owned a video game. You have owned a license to play that video game. That's the legal distinction. It's not like, oh, well, I bought this game, I now own it. It's my game. I can sue people in court if they try and own it. Like, so you just had your physical copy, which is a lot harder to take away. Unless there's disk rot, which also isn't a huge problem unless you're Methuselah and you live to like 2000. The digital side of things is, I think there needs to be more emphasis on peer-to-peer networking and offline modes for stuff. Because even if the servers go down for Redfall, you can play Redfall solo. You can't play it peer-to-peer co-op anymore because that's not a thing. It's only server-based co-op. So I do hope that, and I know it's extra work, so it's probably not going to happen because what's the incentive? It's like, okay, this game's delisted and the servers are off. What do I care about paying people for a month or 3 of work to fix that?
That's
so it
where
would
the
have
FTC
to be,
comes in.
It has to be a law thing.
Yeah. Luke, you love law, right?
Logan loves legislation is what it is.
Luke Lohr, the law fan.
The Xbox law expansion pass.
Oh man, see, I feel like I'm gonna copyright that. You know what? That's patent infringement. I'm telling everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Nintendo coming after you, anyways.
Yeah, we're in trouble.
Man.
They already had it.
I said the word Mario. I'm sorry.
You had the word expansion. That was our mistake.
Yeah,
they had the expansion pack for the N64. You're screwed.
Too close. So it goes. I want to say a quick thank you once again to A Coffee Chick and Korkenstein for donating today, both gifted subs and the super chat. We really appreciate you guys. Thank you for helping us out. Gentlemen, I appreciate both of you for hanging out with us. Jesse, let us know, one, the stuff that you've been working on. I know we put some links in chat at the top of the show. 2, what's coming along the way, and 3, where people can find you.
So everything for us is just xboxera.com or youtube.com/xboxera. If you like anything we do for as little as $3 a month, you can go to patreon.com/xboxera and back us if you so wish. Big thing I just did was Dragon Age Inquisition preview, hands-on. Tried to keep it as spoiler-free as I could for those of you who don't want to be spoiled. So it's not as long as some others, but they were actually very insistent. Please don't spoil stuff. And then I watched other people. I'm like, no. But big stuff coming. We're covering pretty much everything. FC 25, NHL 25, Diablo Vessel of Hatred, hopefully Starfield Shattered Space, Dragon Age, The Veilguard, even the Batman Arkham Shadow game. Pretty much everything that's coming, we try to review. Small team, only 2 of us are technically employees in any way, shape, or form. There's the owner and me. Then we're very lucky to have a whole group of volunteers who get free games for, spending 30 hours reviewing them. But yeah, it's xboxera.com. That's where you can find it all.
And I will put that link in chat for sure. It's Jesse, sincerely, really appreciative of you being here with us today, for sure. So
yeah,
Logan, my friend, what's going on in the world of Keelhauled, Sea of Thieves, and your content for XEP? Because you've been putting in the work, man.
Yeah. So as far as Keelhauled and Sea of Thieves just had to throw out hot patch or hot fixes for some major bugs and crashes that were going on with their latest update, which was on the eve of on the eve of their community weekend, which is going on right now. So definitely be talking about that, as well as just some of the things that they've got going on. I think as soon as we're done here, I'm going to be jumping on the seas to go do some pop-up plunder and stuff. So I'll have an episode kind of covering some of the issues with that, but also some of the fun that we've been having on the Sea of Thieves there. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I don't think that I've got anything else lined up right now for XEP. We're in the talks about doing stuff, but we'll see if we can get some stuff rolling out soon.
Don't we know what you're reviewing next? You're going to work on our Assassin's Creed coverage. We know that.
Yeah.
I think there was something else.
Was there something else?
I don't know.
There's something else. I can't remember.
There's so much coming that it's just like, I know I'm doing Black Ops. You're doing Assassin's Creed. There's more.
Yeah.
There's more stuff. So, because Xbox era is where I tend to go for like big team stuff. We're like the small, like when we can get to it kind of thing. So,
yeah. But yeah, definitely. There's going to be a lot of stuff coming out, and definitely looking forward to jumping back in for the next reviews. Happier with my Plucky Squire review, but I've definitely got some areas where I want to make sure that I do some adjustments for future updates and stuff. I've gotten a lot better about how to build up reviews and stuff like that, but I'm still learning, so enjoying that aspect.
Yeah, I've been doing them for essentially about 3 years. I'm about to hit 300, and I still don't feel happy about most of them.
I feel like
I do a video for all of them. It ends up taking a lot of time.
It does. It's surprising how although I'm starting to get a better feel on what types of content I need to record while I'm playing through, so that way I can kind of have like, because I know what I'm probably going to end up speaking to. So it's like, Now that mindset's in there, I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm at this part of the game. I should probably start recording.
I hope for that too, but I still end up with about 100 gigs for most games. But I'm doing 4K 60 at like the max bit rate YouTube lets you do, so it adds up quick.
Ooh, hey Luke, you want to start sharing files that are at 4K 60?
No. No.
You can get them relatively low, like good quality but low size if you just do the upload to OneDrive thing through the Xbox.
That was my trick with Hellblade. And I've used that trick a few times.
Yeah, they're like 25K bit rate. The most YouTube lets you go up to is 68K. So I do 68K. So like if I've got 4 hours of gameplay, it's roughly 80 gigs. But yeah.
There you go. All right. Abdel with kind of our last little shout out here says, shout out to Special Nick, best leaker in the industry.
On his Twitter feed from now on.
I knew he was going to say it. I love it. All righty, guys. You can find me on socials at InsipidGhost. I've really been enjoying a lot of the horror stuff lately. And thank you for all your suggestions. I've been having a blast with Dead by Daylight and The Medium and Quarry and a bunch of others. So thank you guys for your suggestions there. Have a fantastic rest of your week, everybody. And one more big shout out to Spartan P451. Thank you for the £2 super chat. Appreciate you. Alrighty, guys, that's going to be it for us. Have a great rest of your week. Take care.
Bye.